Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here with us, and especially we've had a lockdown for a couple of months and things have been quite rough in India, and our little bookstore has had to close for a while, and we've just opened and come online, so it's very invigorating for us to have you here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
We have 100 excited people joining us, all of whom want to say thank you. I just wanted to start by thanking all of you who joined us, because your support has meant a lot to us in the last couple of months. Especially during the lockdown, you've supported us with gift vouchers, buying books from our online store, and keeping our social media community alive. So in times of great uncertainty, this is very warm and welcoming. Thank you. And of course, Roxane Gay doesn't need much of an introduction because you're all here to hear her, but she's the author of Ayiti, An Untamed State, Bad Feminist, Difficult Women, and Hunger, which I believe has gone into its 7th reprint. Congratulations. And she writes for the New York Times, has written World of Wakanda for Marvel. And we find Roxane Gay's engagement with her audience and politics and pop culture very insightful. And we find your work, Roxane, extremely moving and accessible. So thank you for that. So how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's very early here for me.
I know, thank you.
But it's not, 8 o'clock is not actually that early. So I'm good. We too have been basically on lockdown. My wife and I live in California, in New York, and we're in California. And even though some of the states are opening, we don't trust anyone. So, we've just been in the house for 3 months. It's been interesting.
Yeah. So would you like to read something for us?
Yeah, sure. Let me find an excerpt. So I thought I would read a chapter from Hunger. And I travel every week during normal times. And so I have a book I read from, but I can't find it anywhere. So this is a book I have never opened. So now I have to find the chapter that I want to read. Oh, whoops. So I thought I would read a chapter about how much I hate exercise, because I really, really hate exercise. Exercise is terrible. And if you are not familiar with the book, Hunger is my most recent book that I wrote by myself, and it is a memoir of my body. I sold it actually right before Bad Feminist came out, and my agent and I were talking, and she said, "What do you want to write about?" And I said, "Well, the thing I want to write about least is fatness." And that's when I realized, damn, I know what I'm going to be writing about next. And so I wrote this book. My disdain for sports, and now exercise, remains pure and constant. It feels like a waste of my time, moving around, sweating, and hoping that something good will rise from that effort. Certainly, there are moments after a workout when I feel refreshed and powerful and healthy, but it is very easy to forget those moments when I need to change into workout clothes and go to the gym or go for a walk or do whatever it takes to move my body. I generally dread exercise, all of it, and then I feel terrible about myself for being lazy, unmotivated, utterly lacking in discipline or self-regard, because intellectually I know exercise is good for me. My hatred of exercise is unfortunate because exercise is necessary for the human body. It is a key component of losing weight and good health, blah, blah, blah. I know the math. In order to maintain your body, you need to eat 11 calories for every pound you weigh. In order to lose a pound of fat, you must burn 3,500 calories. If you're a 150-pound woman, 30 minutes of aerobic exercise burns about 220 calories. 30 minutes of elliptical training burns about 280 calories. Running at a brisk pace will burn 120 calories a mile. I should take some consolation in knowing that at my size, I burn way more calories than that 150-pound woman, but alas, I do not. In the corner of my bedroom, there is a recumbent exercise bike. When I feel particularly motivated about losing weight, I will ride that bike for up to an hour a day. It's a good time to sweat and catch up on reading. I own a few hand weights that I'll flex and curl when I remember to. I have a large inflatable ball upon which I sit to do abdominal exercises and squats and the like. I do not suffer from ignorance where exercise is related. I suffer from inertia. Over the years, I have joined countless gyms. I have worked with personal trainers, though grudgingly, given that I hate being told what to do, and that hatred multiplies when I am told what to do by someone who is thin and impossibly fit and charging me a significant amount of money on an hourly basis. I have a membership to Planet Fitness, though I have never visited any Planet Fitness. Basically, I donate $19.99 a month to their corporate existence and the idea that I can walk into a Planet Fitness anywhere in the country should I feel like working out. I have worked with personal trainers off and on over the years, recognizing that perhaps the support of a professional might help me improve my fitness. These days, my trainer is a young guy born and raised in Indiana named TJ. He is short and compact and has an unbelievable body. His whole life is fitness. He literally glows with youth, health, and the vigorous enthusiasm of having the world as his oyster. He is a big advocate of chicken breasts as a source of protein and mustard as a condiment because, in his words, it is fat-free and low in calories. Not a session goes by when he doesn't mention some aspect of his diet that makes me so sad for him and his palate. I worry he doesn't know about spices or flavor or anything that makes food delicious. TJ never seems to know what to make of me because I do not glow and I am not young and I am not cheerful. He runs me through my paces, always offering encouragement. He is not a nightmare trainer out to break my soul. He is genuine and kind and dedicated. And I suppose I am his albatross. I am his project. He is just so cheerful. He is a true believer in the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. He makes it all seem so easy as I pant and sweat and ache. I want to murder this man when we work out. I am generally terrified I'm going to drop dead at any moment, my heart pounding as I struggle to catch my breath. Sometimes when he asks me to do something that seems well beyond my body's capabilities, I want to scream, "Don't you see that I'm fat?" I once asked this very question, and he said very calmly, "That's why we're here, isn't it?" And so I walked to my nearby water bottle, drank freely, muttering, "Fuck you," under my breath. I cursed at him a lot.
Thank you. When I read that passage in the book, I thought you sounded a lot angrier, so it's very jovial. Are you working out during the lockdown? Is that?
I am in my, so I've actually, that chapter was written several years ago. And hold on one second.
Yeah.
So I wrote that chapter several years ago now, and I was living in Indiana, and TJ's great, but now I have a new trainer. Her name is Sarah, and I also have a home. So I have worked out. I've actually worked out pretty much every day during lockdown.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. Yeah, we've had 2 months, and I can't say the same for myself. So, I wanted to ask you. In the lead up to this conversation, I read and reread some of your work, and personal stories in some form or the other, or some things that have to do with personal experiences, whether it's hunger and the Haitian experience, the immigrant experience, and both your novel and the short stories, and also the portraits you make in Difficult Women. They're sort of sharp and searing, and I was very curious about how on the one hand you're able to put people in the center and speak from their voices, and you also have great empathy for them, even when you show them in a bit of, you aren't afraid of showing the flawed, the vulnerable, the not so perfect. And that's what makes it so relatable for me as a reader, and I'm sure everybody here, because it feels like I'm not very far away from these characters and I can listen to them. And there's no judgment. So I was just curious about, how do you come up with your characters? Do you research them? There's some stories in Difficult Women where people go to a yoga class. Do you sit and watch them there? Or especially in your experiences of Haitian experiences? Do you bring them from your family or your own experience? Because there's a touch of that personal which makes it come alive very much when one reads it.
Yes, so I do a range of things. So yes, I absolutely do research. I do a lot of research because I want to make sure that the people I'm portraying, that I'm doing so ethically, that I'm doing so accurately. I want readers to immerse themselves in my writing. And one of the fastest ways to actually distract a reader is by putting something factually incorrect into your story. And so research does matter quite a lot. I do also draw from experience. I think, because it truly, especially with my fiction, it's fiction. And so with my nonfiction, I absolutely draw from my life, but I also that personal experience with research so that people will think that I'm a credible authority on the things that I'm writing about. So it's just a combination of all of the above.
Yeah. And the other thing that I loved your essay on Toni Morrison, of course, because I mean, even here with very different experiences that we have over here, there's a sense of the same sort of comfort and relatability that she's able to bring us to when we read things. And in that essay, you mentioned that she's the one who made you feel like your voice and experience is a rich place to write from. And you are now such a person for so many writers, because we follow you on social media and you do so many workshops and help people draft their personal stories or speak from their experiences. What do you think is the value of that, of working from experience for fiction or nonfiction?
You know, there is some value, but of course you have to be careful. You don't want to only draw from experience, but the value is that personal experience can go quite a long way. Like the things that we've been through absolutely inform how we think, how we see the world, and what we want to communicate to the world. And so I do think that drawing from that is just incredibly useful. And for women, for people of color, for queer people, for those of us who are, you know, multiple of those things, we are not as well represented in publishing as we should be. And so one of the ways that I think we do engender empathy in the world is by writing about our life experiences and the kinds of things that we experience that people may not know about. The challenge is that people think that that's the only thing you can be an authority on, that you can't be an expert on microbiology or North Korean relations or whatever. And because not only, you know, we're not just authorities on ourselves. We are not just capable of writing from our subject position. We can do anything. And so I do try to always caution that it's not only about writing from experience.
But since it's this kind of time in the world, we're also having quite a time of it in India recently. So I was just thinking about your work with memoirs, and memoirs are sort of political texts. And in India, for example, the anti-caste, anti-oppression, Dalit literature has played a really, really large role in, as you said, engendering empathy, creating a political voice. And it's ranged from folk poetry to full-on autobiography and so on. So do you think that the memoir has that function across contexts, at least from your context? And can we expect social change from something like a memoir?
I think it can, but I don't think that we should. I don't think we should think that if we write about our lives enough, people will love us, people will respect us, people will think that we deserve to be considered and treated with humanity. There are people who cannot be reached, and no matter how beautifully we write about our lives, they're not going to be moved. Like they're racist, they're classist, they are deeply just entrenched in the caste system. They're not reachable. And so I think we always have to account for that there are people that cannot be reached and that we have to fight for change despite them and despite the roadblocks that they're going to put in the way of progress. But I do think that for people who are in any way open-minded, writing from the personal will reach them. And I've certainly seen that with my books. certainly seen, especially doctors with hunger, a lot of doctors have come to me and said that it has changed how they're going to work with their fat patients. It has changed how they understand their fat patients. That means a lot to me to know, because so don't get health care because of the fat phobia they know they're going to encounter when they engage with the medical system. So I think it's incredibly useful to remember that we can make progress that way.
Were you surprised by the kind of astonishing, like your sort of devastating reach that hunger had, that it was almost something people were waiting to hear? And it doesn't matter what identity you are when you receive it, but it's your sort of vulnerability, the way you open up that space for that experience. Did you expect that when you wrote it? Did you think that it would get into the 7th reprint, which is amazing?
Yeah, I did not. I did not. I was very proud of the book I wrote. I was very scared to put that book out in the world because of the vulnerabilities that I put onto the page. But I am very surprised that so many people connected, because I hear a lot from, especially women I consider thin, and they tell me how moved they were by hunger and how much they, and it really forced me to confront some of my own prejudices that I have toward people in different kinds of bodies, because I would often look at them and just think, my goodness, like what on earth do you have to worry about in a body like that? And the truth is that everyone has a story of what it means to live in their body. And I really have opened my mind to recognize that. Though, of course, I'm not going to cry for you if you are thin. I'm just not.
Do you also find that you sometimes have to, you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned this in the book, but I think you mentioned it in an interview later, that you become the voice that people want to come to talk to. And is that something that you find enriching or exhausting? Because I'm sure that's part of your work, that I feel like I can speak with you, and there's a sort of very democratic, open quality to it. And does that sometimes become a burden?
I don't know that it's a burden, but I mean, for the most part, it's not something I've ever wanted or asked for. I just want to write what I want to write, and have lots and lots of people read it, and that's it. But I still recognize the responsibility, and I try to take it as seriously as I can. There are definitely times when it is a lot of pressure, and that can be really challenging, because I am not the spokesperson for Black women or Black women. And people have a tendency, especially white people, to only consider one voice that is not like them. And I never want to be the person who is keeping other people of color from being heard and receiving the considerations that I receive. So it can be a tricky position to be in as well, but it's okay. I mean, these are good problems to have.
How do you decide that limit between disclosing and not disclosing? Because we like the personal story as a form a lot. And what's remarkable, we've read some memoirs where people just don't put themselves out, but they put documentation and detail. But you open some, especially what I consider the flawed parts of you that you could just choose not to. So what's the craft that goes behind that? Because it's so tightly held. And it's also deceptively open. So that's a very interesting thing in hunger, especially.
Yeah, I have very firm boundaries about what I will and will not put into my work. And I often hear from readers who say, oh my gosh, I feel like I know you, we're best friends. You share so much. And I'm like, actually, I'm a very private person, and you only know what I want you to know. And it's really important to stick to your boundaries. And I always encourage younger writers, especially who are marginalized, that you don't have to cannibalize yourself to have the right to use your voice and to tell your story, whatever that story may be. So I always also try to remind myself of that. Like, I do not have to tell readers absolutely everything. and it is just incredibly important. So I just try to remember that. You don't have to give up everything. And I really wish more writers understood that, because you see a lot of young writers write these essays that they were paid a fraction of money for, and they have to completely expose themselves and cut themselves wide open. And I think that's deeply unfair. And so I just always want people to know you can write about other things.
And do you feel like, especially with the internet becoming a sort of self-publishing platform now, where you have the testimonies of various young women come out for something like the Me Too movement, do you feel like that boundary is sort of crossed in many, many ways because people feel the need to share experience, but on the other hand, sharing those experiences opens up these really rich conversations. So how do you feel about that internet moment that we have at the moment, that going on?
Good moment. I think anytime more people can use their voices and share them, it's good. The problem, not the problem, but the challenge is that truly anyone can share whatever thoughts that they're having. And that means that in addition to people sharing interesting and valuable stories, there are also a bunch of assholes and idiots sharing and very racist and homophobic and otherwise bigoted stories. There's a lot of hate and especially on the internet, because there is no real authority on the internet, kind of the Wild West. So, it's a mixed bag, but I always think that freedom and the freedom of speech, you have to err on the side of the freedom of speech. And the minute you start to say who can and who cannot speak, you really go down a slippery slope, because eventually they're, and so I do think that seeing bigotry get room to breathe is dangerous, but what's more dangerous, we should silence that.
Oh, yeah. How does Pride Month feel there right now? It's a very intense time that you have. I mean, I've heard your various conversations in the public eye. So do you feel like your writing has helped you have a very strong voice in a moment like this and be a very important part of this political moment?
Yeah, this is a strange time in the United States. There's a lot of upheaval, a lot of protests, because police brutality continues unchecked here. And I think Black people in particular have just had enough. And so we're currently in a moment where a lot of white people are professing their love of Blackness and their interest in different. It's just nonsense. I don't believe any of it. And so it's with Pride, we're also in most places on lockdown, so Pride parades are not necessarily happening, and celebrations are not necessarily happening. They've moved online, they've moved virtual, and focused on Black Lives Matter this year. And so it's an interesting time. And as a writer, as a Black woman writer, this is like the 1 week of the year where people care what Black women think. And so I'm getting a lot of work. And that's interesting because I've been here all along. Like, you should have asked me what I thought 5 weeks ago. I mean, I had plenty to say then as well. So interesting to all of a sudden become this hot commodity, and I know other Black women writers are dealing with the same thing, and it's just, there's a lot going on.
Do you feel like this interest will sustain itself, and the idea of voices will
go ahead.
No, just that you think this kind of not hot commodity but something more sustained is in the making right now, and writing will have a lot to do with it?
I want to believe so. I very much want to believe so. But the American cultural memory is very short. And I don't even know that it's unique to America. People really are quick to forget history. So I just don't know that people are going to be able to sustain what's happening right now. In particular, we're already seeing people here who are saying, just so tired of this. I'm just so exhausted. Like they're experiencing what people are calling ally fatigue, which is absurd. It's absolutely.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What'd you say?
What was that? Ally fatigue.
Like they're tired about racism. They're tired of thinking about transphobia and misogynoir. So, I mean, what a luxury to be tired. How dare you? So, I don't know. But I will say that this moment does feel different from most of the previous moments. Like, I do think, for whatever reason, this moment is something. People, like, we're seeing more white people get on board. The protests are not stopping, even though the media has moved on to a new story. This is a big moment, and I do hope that something comes of it, because so much is at stake.
Yeah, it's a strange sort of, it's also a really big moment here, but we're not sure in which direction we're going to go. Yeah. So waiting and watching with slightly...
Very interesting leaders who have very interesting ideas of what
we do. I think we're also skirting war at the moment, so it's a very strange time in India for us, for sure.
Yeah, I that, which has to be a little terrifying.
Yeah, and so we think that we've had this conversation about how much does reading matter and how much does sharing, especially as a bookstore, that's what we think about. What kind of reading can we make sure people are going to read? What are the books that we can make sure people access? So for us, a lot of conversations around caste here, the environment, queerness, all of this we try to open up. So what does queerness feel like to you in this kind of month, this time? The Supreme Court had some ruling in the US that we saw. We also have a similar, very regressive bill, and Pride Month takes on very sort of simple rainbow celebratory things and doesn't have enough of a critical eye. So what do you feel about queerness at this point? And
you know, it's an interesting time to be queer in the United States. And so, well, we live in LA and New York, so quite frankly, it's fine. It's awesome. We wash hands, we're out. Everyone knows, like, we're in a relationship. We have neighbors. We have a pride flag hanging outside of our house, both here and in New York. You know, in some ways, it's great to be queer because we have more public safety and more opportunities to be out than ever before. But, you know, a lot of, especially gay conservatives, were like, Donald Trump loves gay people and everything is going to be fine under him. But especially interested in eroding the rights and dignity of the trans community. And so, frankly, if all of us are not free, then none of us are free. And so it is challenging to watch what this administration is doing and the ways in which they are trying to retract freedoms. My partner and I are actually very, very concerned about marriage equality. Because it's legal now, but it could, you know, with the way this administration is going and because of the Republican platform they released last week, we know that they want to get rid of marriage equality. So we actually eloped and got married a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations. I'm sure the room would clap, but they're all on mute so that they don't trouble us. So congratulations on your elopement. We have been enjoying your Medium stories about living in with your partner. So thank you for that. That's also a very soothing. There's someone in the comments who says that you sharing your cooking Instagram stories and stories like that is very soothing. Do you enjoy doing that?
I do. We are normally very, very busy. We normally actually go out to dinner probably 5 or 6 nights a week. And so one of the good things about quarantine has been being able to cook and bake and try recipes I've long wanted to try but just haven't had time for. I have a great kitchen here, so it's been really nice, and I do enjoy it. It's very
someone's asked if your relationship with cooking and food has changed since you wrote your memoir.
Yeah, oh, it's changed drastically. You know, one of the things, I wrote Hunger because I wanted to write a memoir of fatness that was not grounded in weight loss, because that's pretty much the narrative you see out there. And as I was writing the book, it ended up being unexpectedly cathartic because I was really forced to confront some of the behaviors I've taken on over the years that were no longer serving me. And so it actually pushed me to I had weight loss surgery about 18 months ago. And it was interesting to see like the kinds of changes that happen when you do that, because I think the surgery is terrible in general, but I also think it worked very well and is working very well for me. And so when you have that surgery and your stomach changes, you have to have a new relationship with food. Now, the thing is, I still love to eat and I still have all of the same issues I had before. So I'm also in therapy, but I'm trying to work on feeling just less guilty that I'm allowed to eat and I can eat what I want. Like, you don't have to, like, you don't have to be all the time with food. So I'm just trying, especially now with all the cooking I'm doing, I'm just trying to embrace eating and recognize eating as something that is not the enemy and is not a forbidden activity.
Can we send you some Indian recipes so that we feature in your Instagram stories?
Yes, you can. I must admit, I am not an adventurous eater, and I have a terrible stomach, and so I don't make a lot of international cuisine, but I am definitely, I'd love to try to make some butter chicken, make a curry or two, so I'm definitely open. If you have good recipes, send them along.
You might have invited trouble because you have 100 excited audience members here who are ardent fans. So what's your favorite book by you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What is my favorite book? I don't know. I would say Difficult Women, I guess, or Untamed State. It's definitely my fiction because I love writing fiction, and that is my first love. It's what I started to write first. And so I would say Difficult Women and or An Untamed State. I love those books very much, and I wish more people did.
I wanted to actually ask you about Difficult Women because as I kept reading it, the title keeps interrupting. I'm constantly searching for the difficult in the women in all of the stories. And I could sometimes get at what you might mean. I went up to Goodreads and there were people who were very upset at the kind of difficult women, some who felt like it was authentic because life is difficult for women. So could you offer us a reading that could help me figure it out? Because I haven't been able to decide what that means.
Oh, it means what, well, it is in many ways a Rorschach test, a test of like what people think and how they see women. And so in many ways, it's not about the women themselves, it's about how they're perceived. Because when women think for themselves, when they have feelings, when they are challenged, when they have trauma, they're considered difficult. And I think that's really frustrating. And so it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's in the same way that Bad Feminist is. So it's like actually difficult. Frankly, the book could be called Difficult Men because it's mostly men who make the so yeah.
So there's a very interesting question someone's asked here. Someone called Karishma who's saying, could you tell us about The Sacrifice of Darkness, your upcoming graphic novel?
Yeah. So in Difficult Women, there is a short story called Sacrifice. We Are the Sacrifice of Darkness. And it's about it's magical realism. It's about this sort of world that's similar to ours, but different, where a miner, Hiram Hightower, gets so tired of working in the dark after the mine owners decide that they need to work 24/7 to make more of this substance called Flareon that is just like this magical substance. And so he buys an air machine and flies it into the sun because he wants to be filled with light once more. and the world becomes shrouded in darkness. And so the graphic novel is about that legacy of being so oppressed that you need to fly into the sun to save yourself, and how his wife and child, who he leaves behind, have to pay the price for what he does, and how they live in a world that thinks that they are responsible for the darkness. And so it's coming out on October 27th, and I co-wrote it with one of my very best friends, Tracy Lynn Oliver, who's an amazing writer as well. And I'm very proud of this book, and I'm very excited for it to come out.
Are you excited about writing graphic novels? Was it, especially the Marvel universe, which is all sorts of misogynist and racist and all manner of things. How did it feel to sort of cut through that? And is it true that you were the first woman writer in the Marvel world? Or?
I was the first Black woman to lead
Black woman.
Marvel.
Wow.
When I created World of Wakanda. So that was in 2017 or 2018. And it's just wild. Like, it's just completely wild that that was the case. It's just completely wild. So we'll see. But I'm very honored that I got to do it. I'm very appalled that I was the first, but I know I wasn't the last. And my goal is always to not be the last. Mm-hmm. So that other Black women come behind me to do the kinds of things that I get to do. And so it's all good.
Do you like writing across forms when you write fiction, nonfiction, which are books, but also graphic novels? Now, do you have any television or cinema coming up that, because you write so much about watching television and watching films, so are you excited to write some?
I am. I've written a pilot that I have to actually revise right now because it's going nowhere. And I sold the pilot, but then I sold it to Amazon, and then bought 2 shows of the same kind, and they went with the other show. So now we're going to take it out again. And I'm also working on a few other projects. I have a movie I'm writing that is going to be on a television network probably next year, or after, depending on what's going on with COVID. And then I am going to be adapting Margot Jefferson's memoir, Negroland, into a television series. And we're going to be making a movie of The Banks, which is a comic book series I recently wrote. And yeah, I've got a couple other things going on. So I'm doing a lot of work in film and television right now. A lot of the work in film and television is like, nobody ever gets to see it. It never makes the light of day. You just work in development for quite a long time. So
did you always want to do it, or is it something that came up of late? And
I think I've always been interested in writing for film and television, and now it seems to be a little more possible. So that is great, and that is something I am excited about. I just hope that someday something I write actually makes it to the screen.
Have you got any favorite Indian authors or fiction or something that you've read from here? And of course, we'd be happy to send you things from here when the lockdown lifts. But
like, the ones the books I've read are like the cheesy, not the cheesy ones, but the ones that I think every American has read. But I love Sacred Games. I thought Sacred Games was really good. And I also liked, actually loved, and I can't remember the name of the book. I'm really bad at titles, but it's a novel about a man who is disabled and he has no legs, and he has this like really oppressed life, but he finds joy anyway. And it's one of those sweeping epic novels that looks at the caste system, and eventually the title will come to me during our conversation. And
I'm sorry to say I can't identify this book, so I'm going to ask everyone who can please to type it up in the chat.
Untitled. It's one of my favorite books. It's so, so good. I remember reading it, and when I closed it, I was just like, oh, I wish I could write like that. And it's written by a man, and if I remember correctly, he's a pig. So, you know, that doesn't narrow it down. So many men writers are just terrible.
Was it Shanta?
No, it was not. I have not read Champaca.
I just know that it's large. Was it a fine balance?
Yes, thank
It
you.
was a fine balance, yes. It's quite a sweeping novel.
I don't think he's a bad man. I was thinking of another writer. But a fine balance, I just think is, I don't know how Indians feel about it, but I loved it.
I must confess, I couldn't get through it and I had to put it away. So I'll make an effort now. I feel like I need to see what you saw.
Naipal was the man. He's just...
He's the bad one.
Yes, very bad. Yeah, so that was the man, and he's dead now. So
he used to like caricaturing Indians at airports who spit a lot. So that kind of format of making fun of what you know and so on. So it's quite controversial here.
yeah.
The recent publishing paid me thing that happened on Twitter, there's a couple of questions people are asking about it. We had some very cool writers in the Indian context. There's a woman called Meena Kandaswamy who was paid 500 Great British pounds, which I think is like 40,000 Indian rupees, which, I mean, no one thought to talk about before. So do you feel like that conversation had any impact? Again, like going back to the sense of online moments which churn up a lot of things, and to read the numbers that you put out and N.K. Jemisin put out. We're big fans of N.K. Jemisin also in Champaca, and it's just alarming. And what can readers do to support this?
You know, readers can buy our books. The more we sell books, the more people think that we deserve bigger advances. Mm-hmm. It's really about sales. That's unfortunate in a capitalist society, but here we are. I don't know that it's going to change. Publishing already knew about the advanced disparity. It's mm-hmm. not information for them. And so I just don't know that anything is going to change. They are deeply entrenched in a system, and I don't think they have really any interest in changing it, because if they did, they would have done so already. That said, there is a lot of scrutiny on them right now. And I think that's good, because people only do right and they only create change when they don't have a choice. Mm. So I hope that it creates change. I hope that Black writers start to get more equitable advances, because right now, it's rough. It is really, disparity is really appalling. And I'm not surprised to hear that disparity extends to women everywhere. I'm just not at all surprised.
Do you feel like, because I've noticed that you answer questions on Goodreads and you're quite active on social media, do you feel like that helps you sort of encourage people along to write more and publish more, and that you have things to say? Because I find that a lot of people ask you on Goodreads, how do I get published? And do you feel like your voice can make that help? It can help people out from mentoring sort of perspective and just being reachable in some way?
I think so, yes. I think that you have to lead by example, and that if you demonstrate to people what it means to put yourself into the world on the page and to do so well, they will feel inspired to do so themselves. So I do think that some of the ways in which I move through the world do inspire people to write their own stories and to take risks with their own work that they want to take. And I'm really glad about that. I think that it's great that people can feel that. So we'll see.
So it's quite similar to that, someone's asked, how do you maintain a kind of authentic voice while ensuring your boundary when you disclose about yourself? I think that applies to so many things that you do.
Yes. So I'm just very firm on my boundaries. I'm very, very firm on my boundaries. And it took a long time to get firm on my boundaries, because I just didn't understand that I deserved boundaries. And so, that was hard. That was really, really hard, to build up the self-esteem to know that I deserve to say no to things I don't want to do, and I deserve to keep parts of my life private. So it was, it took time and practice. And okay, what was the other part of the question?
Just that sense of how do you...
Time and practice and failure, and learning.
Someone says, really interesting question. I'm just trying to find it for a moment. Something about Jordan. What's your take on Jordan Peele's horror films and the Black representation in them?
Oh, I love Jordan Peele. I think his representation is great and interesting. I think it's so awesome for Black storytelling to happen in ways that is not strictly grounded in suffering, in slavery. He really just tells a different kind of story, and I fucking love it. I just love it. I think he's awesome. And I really wish that more people, he's actually doing well for himself, so it's not like he's some upstart who's not getting any attention. But I do wish that more people could do what he does and could follow in his footsteps and receive the public support that he gets for his work, because he's just doing really great work.
I think a lot of people related to this. I know that my mother read your work friend column about dealing with domestic workers, and it's a big thing over here because we had a 2-month lockdown and an enormous migrant crisis, because most of the people who do that kind of domestic work come to us from different states. So someone says thank you for that column because it brought the inequality in care work to light. And yeah, because that's a kind of discussion that many of us have had to have about payment and that sort of thing. So everyone's curious also about your bookshelf. I think they're mixing up the question just so you can tell us a little bit about the books behind you.
Oh, the books behind me are not my bookshelf. I have a library, not in this room. And then I have a small library in the front room of this house. So the books behind me, publishers send me copies of books. They send me galleys. It's so galleys that have come in the past month. Yeah, so some of the books are good, and so I make piles of what I might read and what I'm definitely going to give away. And my wife and I actually just got a little free library that we're going to put up in front of the house, and so we're going to fill it with books.
But to go back to the work friend, do you enjoy that column? Do you feel like it's a really interesting place to work from right now?
Yes, I do enjoy it. I'm really excited to get the job. I just started. I've done 2 columns. I'm actually working on my 3rd column right now. And it was an unexpected opportunity. When the editor of the column got in touch with me, I was just like, oh, sure, okay. And so, it's fun. It's a widely read column. I did not realize how widely read, and it's read by a lot of people who want to police my fucking tone and tell me what I can and cannot say. And it is just very, very annoying. So that part is really frustrating, and I don't like it. But feedback is important, and you're not going to make everyone love you. So that's also fine. I don't mind feedback. I just mind some of the hatred that comes. Like so many people. I thought I was being really nice in my letter about Maria, the housekeeper. I'm from Haiti, and in Haiti we have a very significant underclass that you know, and it's part of how the country works. Americans will never understand it. Like everyone has a housekeeper. House have housekeepers, and so I guess not everyone, because there are certainly people who don't. But you know what I mean. It's like just so ingrained in the culture that there is no Haitian culture without it, and it does needs to change, because people take advantage of the system and they treat their house staff just appallingly. And so for me, I was coming from a very specific place where you shouldn't be worried about yourself only. You have to be, and so many people are like, why didn't you tell her to worry about herself and Maria? And the thing was, like, the fact that she had to worry about herself was implied. Like, why does that need to be said? She has the money to hire a housekeeper, so obviously it's gonna be okay. And so, you know, people really got very in their feelings about the column. I've gotten like hundreds of emails about it. Like, why did you have to castigate her? I have a housekeeper and I haven't fired her. And I'm like, look, I have a housekeeper too. I don't understand why you are this deep in your feelings. Like, I think people, I was being nice. And so that part is also challenging, where people perceive my tone because I'm Black, and because I'm a Black woman, they perceive me as angry. And I was like, oh my God, that was the polite version. Like I originally wrote. Ooh.
It resonated a lot over here because we have a constant demand for people to do our work without acknowledging how much work they have to do. So during the lockdown, they had to leave cities and go, and the government made it very hard for them. So that column could just easily apply to India, and I think it does resonate.
I'm really glad to hear that too. You always want your work to sort of extend beyond borders. So I'm really glad that another culture can find something useful in their own.
So there's a question someone's asked about, how do you think about feminism in terms of classes, like upper class privileged feminism and low class feminism? And of course, I'm sure in your context, white and Black and...
Well, you know, feminism in this country, especially mainstream feminism, has historically prioritized the needs of heterosexual, able-bodied, upper middle class white women. And I would love to say things have changed, but I don't know that things have really changed that much. And so as a Black woman, it can be very challenging. But I do publicly claim feminism and not womanism. I also claim womanism. I think womanism is incredible. So womanism is Black feminism. Feminists just got so, Black feminists just got so tired of being excluded that they decided that they would create a practice that was more suited to them and that was more inclusive of their needs. And I think that's awesome. But for me, I wanted to be able to claim feminism because I think we should hold white feminists accountable and demand that women of color, that they were working class women, disabled women, in the conversation, in the feminist conversation, in the feminist project. So it can be very challenging. There is also, of course, the class divide. And for me, that's a challenge to negotiate because I grew up middle class, and certainly now I'm well off. I'm definitely well off. So there are things I'm never going to understand. And so I don't want to ever speak for someone, but I do hope that I create space for working class women to participate in feminism and feel included and prioritized in the way that everyone else is prioritized. But we have a lot of class issues in feminism because a lot of times people just take for granted things that if you have money are possible, and if you don't, aren't. So one example, and this is of course a shifting example because the world is changing so quickly, but there's this social club for women in the United States called The Wing. It's not a social club, it's like a co-working space / social club. And it costs, I think, around $2,000, $2,500 a year to be a member of. And for some women, that's like, oh, it's only $250 a month. That's like totally fine. But for some women, it's very expensive. And so as this club was forming, and they now have locations of, you know, I think in maybe 15 they have probably 15 or 16 locations at this point. They were really criticized for not being inclusive. And at the same time, I just thought, they were like, what about working class women? And I was like, do working class women want to fucking come sit in the wing? Like, has anyone asked them what they want and what they need? Are you paying your staff equitable? Like, I mean, there's like more things to worry about. Complex issues around it. Like, but a lot of people were like, they should be given free memberships. And I'm like, if they have 3 jobs, I don't know that they have time to come here and sit down. And so, hold on, my computer wants to restart.
Oh.
Remind me tomorrow. I don't know why. It's a new computer. So long story short, I bought a new computer. I started setting it up last night and it was taking forever. So I walked away. And when I came in this morning, it was done, but I haven't finished setting it up. Anyway, yeah. So like, class is a big issue with feminism, and we do not account for it enough. And I include myself in that, but I am always trying to improve and be more mindful of class issues and recognize that I shouldn't try to speak for people who have different experiences. I should create space for them to share them themselves.
I'm going to read some questions out because I think you have, there are lots of questions that have come in. One, Aruna asks, it's very difficult, basically, body and empathy are not part of curricula in education or the value system, and it's sometimes too late to learn those things. So what should we be doing? What are the ways in which we can learn these things?
I don't know. I think it's something that's very personal and that we have to all work on, because we just, especially for women everywhere, body standards are extraordinarily harsh. And we are forced to carry really unrealistic expectations. And that's just painful. And so I think reading, I think doing a lot of reading. There are so many fat activists and body positive activists who are doing incredible work, and a lot of them are on Instagram. And so you really have to just go out and find the resources. You have to take it upon yourself until we can get it into curricula. And I honestly don't know how we do that. I do not know how we shift the culture enough to accommodate body positivity and fat positivity, because prejudice against fatness is so deeply ingrained in pretty much every culture. And fatness is not a thing. It does not exist, really. And so fat phobia is extremely, extremely bad there. And I've also encountered it when I was in Singapore. Recently, Singaporean activists were telling me about how difficult it can be to be fat. And like, these were people who were maybe 10 pounds over what doctors would consider the norm. And I was just like, I'm sorry, but if you think you're fat, I don't know what to tell you, but you are absolutely not fat. And it's just really sad that that's the case in so many places in the world.
So someone's asked, what is your relationship with your self-worth now than when you started off to begin with as a writer? And do you think that age helps with that? Do you think writing about your experiences help with that? And something about how that may not be the case for men.
You know, it's evolving. My relationship to self-worth is evolving, as all, and I think it always will be, just because it's just hard to maintain a sense of self-worth in a world that's always trying to tear you down. But you know, the more that I accomplish, the older I get. I'm very well loved by my partner. All of these things contribute to valuing myself, but also I'm in therapy, and I'm very actively in therapy and doing a lot of work around self-worth and recognizing that I have every right to live in the world and hold my head high. And so it's just a project, but I'm certainly in the best place I've ever been with regards to self-worth. I have my bad days, and I'm full of self-loathing like any woman, but I work on it.
Thank you. Someone wants to know if you have any trashy Netflix shows for the rest of us to watch that you would recommend.
Yes. We just finished last night the stupidest show I've ever fucking seen. It's a reality show called Selling Sunset. And I love trash real estate shows. I just find them very relaxing. And so, and Debbie is not into them at all. She does not like reality TV because she gets very invested and very upset when people are mean. And so it's like, what point is the meanness? And she's like, no, I don't like it. So we just finished that, and it's very trashy. Also, in the middle of Love is Blind. And then we tried to watch Too Hot, or not Hot or Not. Something about being, the premise was that a bunch of people who were too hot were put together on an island, and they were paid, like they would only make too hot to handle. Thank you, Janani, or Jenny.
Yeah.
And it was just like, we watched, I think, 2 episodes, and it was just so extraordinarily stupid that I at a very high threshold for reality television was like, oh no, it's too far. Also watching a show called Money Heist, which is really good. It's actually not, I wouldn't call it trash per se, but it's very, it's a Spanish show, but it is dubbed in English, about a heist, and it's very good.
Since you're recommending TV, do you have any book recommendation and what your reading habits during the lockdown, and what you're reading right now?
Oh, I'm reading a lot because I'm the head fiction judge for the National Book Award this year.
Oh, wow.
So I'm basically reading every novel that was published this year, or at least parts of it. And so I actually just finished, I'm currently reading Yagi Yaski's follow-up novel, Transcendent Kingdom, which comes out in September. It's brilliant. It's as good as homegoing. And that's surprising because the sophomore novel is generally, they call it the sophomore slump. It's not as good, but this one is, if not better. So I cannot wait for people to get their hands on that in September. Another book I just read that I liked, because I read one that I didn't love, but I've also read a few that I loved. I wish my memory was better. I'm going to look it up because
Okay.
otherwise.
I'm just sort of sifting through the questions because some have sort of been answered. And what's your favorite Sweet Valley book?
Oh, all of them. No, I can't. I think number 1, Double Love.
Did you ever like Georgia Tale?
Did I like Georgia Tale?
Georgia Tale?
Oh, I've never read it.
Oh, okay. Also in the sort of.
Oh, okay.
How do you deal with failure?
You know, I get in my feelings about it and I beat myself up, but then I'm very stubborn and I love to succeed and I'm very ambitious. And so then I'm just like, all right, I'm going to go at it again and I'm just going to try again. And so I generally, failure just makes me work harder and motivates me more. The book I was trying to think of was called You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat.
Okay.
And it is phenomenal. Oh, I love it. I loved it. And I also read a really good book called Daddy by Emma Klein.
Okay.
It's a short story collection. And people are mixed feelings about Emma Klein, and I have mixed feelings about Emma Klein, but she wrote a really good book. And then Run Me to Earth by Paul Yoon. It's set in the Laotian minefields and follows 3 people throughout their lives. And I loved it. Just brilliant novel. He's very underrated as a writer.
There's someone asking about, says that I'm an economically and socially privileged woman, and I find it difficult to find my voice during writing. So how do you negotiate this space when there is questions of oppression and marginalized and other voices? Is my voice worthy, and does it matter if I'm privileged?
I mean, so I will point you to an essay I wrote called Peculiar Benefits in Bad Feminist, and you can also Google it, it's online. If we talk so many people, and especially women, a man would never ask that question. So not a bad thing. I mean, that's a reflection on men, not on women. We talk ourselves out of things because we want to be polite and we want to be respectful. And I think so long as you ask yourself that question, you're never going to write something that shouldn't be written, because you already know what you should be thinking about and what you should be concerned with. And so it's not that you shouldn't use your voice, it's that you should make sure that when you have the opportunity, that you're also advocating for people from different subject positions to use their voice. There's room for all of us. And so we don't have to exclude ourselves from the conversation. We have to make sure that we expand the conversation so that more people can participate. So you are privileged, and it's so important to acknowledge it. Everyone has privilege, especially here in the United States. But if you have money, if you come from the right so-called caste, you do have to be aware of your privilege, and you have to acknowledge it. And so one of the key things I try to do in all of my writing is acknowledge where I'm coming from and acknowledge my background, so people can understand why I have come to the opinions that I've come to, and so that people can understand what my deficiencies are. And so you just want to make sure that you do that.
Did you know that you were to be featured in Girl, Woman, and Other? And did that take you by surprise? And what did you think?
I had no idea. That was another great book I read this year. I loved Girl, Woman, Other. I actually read it last month and I loved it. I had no idea. I was actually just lying on my couch reading it, and I was like, oh, this book is so good. This book is so good. And then I came up to my name, and my name kept coming up, and I was like, oh my God, what is happening? What? Amazing. It was amazing. I was very flattered. She's amazing, and she should have won the Booker alone.
She should have. Yes, we think so also.
Atwood admits she should have won the Booker alone.
Speaking of famous authors, what do you think of J.K. Rowling and her inability to stay silent in moments like this?
So first, I tried to read the first Harry Potter book. I couldn't even get through it, and that's because I'm old. I don't want to read children's shit. It's not my thing. But I know that many, many people my age and younger and older are very attached to J.K. Rowling, and I feel very sad for them to see someone they admire and who created such a vivid and vibrant world. Like, I think the world she created is outstanding. And she's imaginative. I have watched all the movies, so I do know what happens in Harry Potter. She's been off key for a while. Every once in a while she'll release some bizarre tidbit about her characters that should have been in the book. It's like, girl, don't tell me Dumbledore is gay afterwards. Put that shit in the book. And so now she's being extraordinarily transphobic, and it pains me a great deal. And she follows me on Twitter, so I actually thought about reaching out to her. But when she wrote that 3,600 word essay, I just realized she cannot be reached. She has decided she is oppressed and that this is her opinion. I'm like, first of all, you're a billionaire. Billionaires cannot be oppressed no matter what they've been through. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate to see someone squander the social capital that she has amassed. It's unfortunate to see her devastate so many people who follow her, whether fans or not. I hope I never make that mistake. I do.
I just wanted to say to everyone who's attending that we're going to take 1 or 2 questions because we're sort of running out of time. Someone called Prabha is asking on how to be friends with another woman in Bad Feminist spoke to her, and she's acutely aware of it. And what are your thoughts on women's relationship with each other and managing conflict with empathy and understanding? I sent that to all my friends, actually. Yes, I think it's one of those things that reaches you.
Yeah, I love that little essay. I wrote it in grad school because for the first I've not ever had a lot of friends, partly because I'm shy in my day-to-day life. And we moved around a lot as a kid. And so I never really got a chance to know anyone because every year we were just in a different place. But I wrote that because I had some really amazing friends. And I also wrote it because people are always like, but what about having to be friends with other women, as if it's a burden? And your relationships with other women are complicated. Maybe it's just you, but if not, and there are tensions sometimes between women, like that is a thing. I think it comes from the patriarchy. So I think it's important to put the responsibility where it belongs. Like women tend to feel, some women tend to feel like they are in competition for resources because we are in competition for resources. So in that scenario, everyone becomes an adversary. And, women can try to tear each other down because of that. But here's the thing, and this is something we all need to remember. Men do it to each other too. People really want to act like women have this really adversarial relationship with one another and it's unique to our gender. It's actually a human condition. People are competitive and people, when they feel threatened, lash out. And when men do it, they're just being competitive and ambitious. And when women do it, they're being petty and vicious. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of questions about bad feminist. How did you work on the flow and the structure of the book? What made you write it? And just to add to that, have editors tried to make your stories more palatable and erasing questions within your stories? And I'm just grouping a couple of things together so that.
Let me see, Bad Feminist. So I actually wrote Bad Feminist as individual essays. And then I was thinking, oh, maybe I have enough content here. Maybe I have enough work here to make a whole book. And so I just started to look at this body of work I had created at that point and tried to think about what would work together and make an interesting book. And originally it was called What We Hunger For. And my publisher was like, oh, too many words. And so I decided to call it Bad Feminist because I had written an essay called Bad Feminist. And there was this feminist theme throughout all of the essays. And it was catchy. And so as I was just ordering the collection, I had read an essay collection by a woman named Katie Roiphe, R-O-I-P-H-E. And I think she's a little evil. And I disagree with almost everything she says, but she's a very good writer. And I really liked how she had structured this essay collection. And so I thought it might be an interesting model for how I structured this essay collection in these sections. And so that's how I came up with the structure. And yeah, now I didn't think the book was going to do well because every essay in the book has been published online. You can actually just Google each essay and print it out and staple yourself a little Bad Feminist. And so I just thought, because people can do that, why would they buy it? And I mean, to this day, it sells incredibly well. And I'm very, very proud of that and very surprised. And I'm humbled by that.
So I'm very sad to say that we're running out of time, although we would have loved to take more of your time. And I'm very sorry, everyone who's asked questions. But thank you for being here. I really want to thank everyone who attended because as we really thrive on the support of our community at Champaca Bookstores. Thank you, Roxane. It's incredible to speak with you and we're very, very happy to have spoken with you. So, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the call in a minute and I hope you have a really nice day and all power to all the movements going on right now.
Likewise, I really hope that war is averted and that everyone stays safe.
Yes, and congratulations on your wedding and elopement. We'll be sure to tell our Indian fans about it.
Oh, good. Please do.
Thank you so much. So, bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.